Welcome back, friends. Dan Vega here, back with another tutorial. And in today's lesson, we are going to take a look at creating a new Spring Boot application right in Visual Studio Code. And what we're going to do is drop Vue right into the project without using the CLI, without creating a separate project. We're going to use Vue in a static file, and we'll use it to test out a REST controller. And we'll do it right after this. Welcome back, friends. Dan Vega here, and I run the website danvega.dev. If you're new to this channel, please consider checking it out. I actually have a newsletter there right on the home page that you can sign up for, where every Sunday I release a newsletter called Coffee and Code. Just lets you know a little bit about what I was up to that week and some cool things that I found around the web. So if you get a chance, sign up for that. Check out some blog posts and videos. And with that, let's learn something new today. All right, so in a recent blog post, you see it's actually the latest one I have, I wrote about and recorded a tutorial on how to create a Spring Boot application right in Visual Studio Code. So not many people were aware of this, but you can use the Spring Initializer right inside of VS Code to create a new project. What I also did in that tutorial was created a separate Vue project to talk to a REST controller. So what I want to look at today is if you're kind of new to Vue, you may not know this, but you don't need any fancy like CLI tools, module bundlers, Webpack, any of that stuff to really just get started with Vue. And so my hope for this tutorial is if you're new to Vue, this might give you something to kind of go off and play with just to test some things out, see if you like Vue without having to buy into like the entire tool chain. So what we're going to do is we'll create a Spring Boot project, and then inside of there in the static directory, we'll go ahead and create, we have that index.html file that we'll use, and that will allow us to just kind of drop Vue into there, and we'll use that to kind of create our tutorial and go from there. So we're going to create basically a Vue inside of Spring Boot, and it'll talk to a REST controller, but we'll do all of this without any CLI tools. So let's jump over to Visual Studio Code. And what I'm going to do, again, if you did not see the last tutorial, please go watch that first. I'm going to kind of assume that you have watched it and kind of jump in and not talk about extensions that are needed or how you create a new project. So I will link to that. Go ahead and watch that before you get into this one. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new project here. So I'm going to say create a new Spring project, and we're going to use Java, and I'm going to give it a group ID of com.danvega. The artifact is going to be Spring Tweets. We'll use a recent version. So I'm just going to use what I used last time, which is the Spring Web and Spring Boot DevTools. And so what that's going to do is it's going to ask for a directory to generate that project in. So I'm going to use the current one and say generate right into this folder. And then I'm going to go ahead and say open that. Okay, so here we are in VS Code in our project, Spring Tweets. So if we jump over to the main application class, so we're going to go source main Java and down to demo application. If we go ahead and run this, this should fire up on localhost 8080. And that looks good. So let's head over to the browser, localhost 8080, and we should see nothing. And that is exactly what we want. So we know that we can't see anything yet because we haven't set up any endpoints. So there's no default endpoint. So it just throws up an error page. So one thing you can do in Spring is actually come into static and create a new index.html file. And if we go ahead and create HTML in here, and go ahead and save this because DevTools is installed. Oh, so actually that is one thing we want to take a look at right away. So I've saved this and it's actually not reloading. So if we go back here and run it, nothing has changed. And that is because DevTools doesn't know to watch the static directory. It's actually part of the exclude path because normally you wouldn't want to watch this. But in our case, like we're gonna be building a front end application that talks to a REST controller. So really, anytime my index.html changes, I do want it to actually restart because I want to see it. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this. So I'm going to hit Control C. And just to kind of show you that, if we came back here and ran this, we should get a blank page, Spring Tweets. There's nothing on this page. So that is what's going on there. So one way that we can kind of fix this is to go into our resources, into application.properties. So there is a property, spring.devtools. What is it? Restart. Exclude. So there's an exclude here, and if we look at this, there's a default. And so this string right here is everything that it's going to exclude by default. So if we just copy and paste that in there, this is everything that it's excluding. So there is static right here. So this is that static directory. So if we go ahead and take that out, and this is stopped, so we're not going to have anything in here right now. So that is there. If we go ahead and run this, okay, so failed to Spring DevTools restart. That is not a property. Why is that in there? We want restart.exclude. Why did it not take that? Okay, let's try that again without the oops. Okay, so now it's fired up. Again, just running it, Spring Tweets. Now if we come in here though and we say Spring Tweets, you can see that as I started to change it there, it went through and restarted for us. So now I can come in here. I actually don't have it enabled, but if we enable live reload, now I can come back here, and as I'm changing this, save, it restarts, and then my browser updates. So that's just a little bit of a development workflow. Again, this is something you wouldn't want to do normally. I think I'm just doing this because I just want to show you how we can drop Vue in on a page and start to use it. And as we're developing, like I need to restart to see those changes. So that's what I'm doing. If you know a better way, please go ahead and share it with me below. So what we want to do before we get to the front end stuff, let's go into the back end. And we're going to do a few things. We're going to create a model and a controller, and we'll use that as we'll use it as like a REST API endpoint that we'll talk to right here in the static file. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to create a couple folders. So let's say controllers, no controller, and model, and I'm gonna just pull this down for now. I don't need to see this. Okay, so in the model, I'm gonna create a new class. We're gonna say friend.java, and inside here, I'm going to create just a simple model. So let's set up the package public class friend, and inside of here we're going to have a private string ID and a private string name. So what we're working with here is basically a list of friends on Twitter. So on Twitter you have an ID or a username and you have a name. And so what I want to do is kind of generate a bunch of stuff now, and I don't want to type this out, so I can do source action in here. And the first thing I want to generate is a constructor, and I want that to be with everything. So I click OK, and now I have a constructor. And so now what I want to do is actually generate some getters and setters. So I can do source action, getters and setters, and I'm going to do it for everything. And finally, source action and a toString. So there is our basic model. Nothing crazy going on here. Just a simple representation of a friend in our application. So now what I want to do is go back and we're going to create a controller. So in the controller, I'm going to say new file, and we're going to say friends controller.java. We're going to set up a package and public class friends controller. Okay, so we need to do a couple things. First, we need to fix this error, Dan. That's what the red squigglies are for. And first we're going to say, all right, this is going to be a REST controller. So we need to add the REST controller annotation. And we also need to set up a request mapping. So we're going to say request mapping is going to be, let's just say /API/Twitter. So that is our request mapping. And I don't know why that's not coming in. There we go. Does that look good? No. How about that? Okay, that seems a little better. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a private list here. So I'm going to have a private list of friend, and we're going to call this friends. And then what I'm going to do is just go ahead and copy in a constructor here so you don't have to see me type all this in. So we need to bring in array list, and this is just a list of people on Twitter. Again, if you're in the Spring community, you probably know most of them. These are just some people I follow on Twitter that I think you should follow. So here's a list of friends. So we're going to create a couple of mappings, right? We want to create a get mapping. So get mapping, and this is going to go to the root context, and this is just going to return, so a public list of friend, and we'll call this list, and this is just going to return our friends array list. And then I'm going to have one more, so I'm going to have a get mapping for /ID. Now again, remember that the base root of this is the request mapping of /API/Twitter. So that is the root context for which you're going to be hitting this endpoint at. So I'm going to say this is public friend get, and this is going to take a path variable. So that path variable is a string ID. And this is just going to return. So we need our friends array list. So to actually filter this out, so I need to search through this array list. So I could kind of just take an approach where you loop over it, you look for someone. If you find that one, then you can return that object. Fortunately with Java 8, we can do something a little simpler here. We can turn this into a stream. And I don't think what is going on here? Friends. We're going to turn this into a stream, and we're going to use the filter method, which takes a predicate. So we're going to say friend, and I want to look for the ID, and we're going to look for something that equals the, so this is the ID that's coming in. I want to see if the ID is equal to the friend.getID. So the ID is, again, essentially the username. And then in here, I basically want to say, all right, find any or else null. Does that look right? No errors, so I think we are good to go. We'll find out. Let's see, no errors, and this is started up. Because every time I've been making a change here, it went ahead and restarted. So sometimes I just like to ignore that or to hide that. It's a little bit distracting to see it restarting over and over again. But I like knowing that I don't have to go in and manually stop and start it. And that's where DevTools really comes in helping. So I think that is it. So what we want to do now is go into index.html and actually call that REST endpoint. So how can we do that? So if we go over to vuejs.org and we go to getting started, there is a development script that you can just drop into a page. So most people think that you have to use like a CLI and build out a full application, and that's great, but like one of Vue's really great strengths is that it's a progressive framework, and you can incrementally start to use it as your needs kind of grow. So my need right now is, hey, I just want to drop it in on a page, use it, and test out some of the reactivity and data binding and event handling stuff. So I'm just going to drop this development version on here. Obviously, if you were to put this in production, you'd switch to this. But while we're developing, I just want to be able to get some of those helpful console warnings. So I'm going to go back over and I'm going to index.html and I'm just going to drop that right in there. So that's going to give me something to get started with. So now what I want to do is I want to start with an app. So let's go ahead and say, let me create a div here. Whoops, I don't know where that came from. So let me create a div with an app ID. And this is where I'm going to basically tell Vue, this is where you're going to be working with. Again, I'm going to go ahead and hide this for now because it's a little distracting. So now I'm going to go ahead and create a script. And in this script, this is where we set up Vue. So the first thing that I do is just create a new instance of Vue. And when I create a new instance of Vue, the first argument that it's taking is an object. And that is a list of options that you're basically passing into Vue. So one of the first things that you need to do is tell it, where are you going to be using me? Where is Vue used on this page? Because it's not like jQuery where you just use it on the entire page. It actually has to know, all right, give me a starting point, give me a container, give me a context to work within. So I'm going to say EL, and that is going to be app. So now anything inside of here will kind of be Vue stuff. Anything outside of it won't really matter to Vue. So the first thing that I want to do is set up some data. So we're going to come in here and you create a data function that returns an object. And inside of that object, we're going to create a friends array. So that friends array is there. And now what we need is a way to populate that friends array. So the way that we're going to do that is in Vue, we have these things called lifecycle hooks. And what I can do is on created, so when the Vue instance is created, I can go ahead and do something. And so what do I want to do? So what I want to do is I want to actually fetch. I'm going to use the fetch API to just make a simple fetch call over to our REST API endpoint, and I'll go ahead and use that. So one thing I'm going to do here is actually set up a variable here called API URL. And this is going to be equal to, what is this? Localhost 8080. And I think we said API/Twitter was the base, right? So now I can use that in my fetch call. And I'm going to say API URL. And once we get that back, we are going to, so the fetch, if you're new to fetch actually returns a promise. So once that promise is fulfilled and we get the response back, what I want to do is actually get whatever was in the response and turn that into JSON. So I'm going to say response.json, and that actually returns a promise as well. So that's where you get the double then from. So I'm going to say that is going to return some friends. And so now what I can do is say this dot friends is equal to friends. So that should give me a list of friends. And so as long as everything is okay, we should be able to go over to our application. We can't really see it yet because we haven't outputted it yet. But if I go into the Vue DevTools, I can see I have a friends array with no data in it. And so we have something going on here, failed to load. The server responded with a status of 404. Okay, so this particular endpoint is not there, localhost 8080. /API/Twitter. What did we do? /API/Twitter. I think because, so we said /API/Twitter, and then slash is actually what is going on here. So you can look at it either way. I guess I don't think I like that there. So what I'm going to just do is say this is just a get mapping. And now if that goes ahead and reloads, I should be able to see there's my 5 friends objects. So cool. We have the data in our index.html. Now we can go ahead and output them. So we're just going to do a simple output here. So we're going to have an unordered list. We're going to have a list item. And in Vue, if you want to go ahead and output something, we use a directive called v4, which will allow us to iterate over some type of collection, whether it's an array, an object, a number, whatever. So we're going to say v4. Sorry, I got a new keyboard and I'm all over the place with it. v4. And what we're going to do is the first argument, the first name in this v4 directive is the alias. So for every row or every iteration, we're basically going to give it an alias, a friend. And we're going to say in, and then the friends is the array that we have down there. And so what we're going to say is for every friend in friends, we want to just display the friend ID. So we're going to say friend.id. And so if we save that and go back to the list here, you can see that it went ahead and updated them. So that's pretty cool. Now we can do is take this one step further. I'm just going to add some styles in here just to show this off. And what I want to do now is as you click on a particular friend, I want to show some details. So what I'm going to do is below this, I'm going to create a class of details. So this is a div. And in the details, I'm going to do something. I'm going to say show details. And this is going to be a Boolean of whether or not I should show this. So here in my data, I'm going to say show details is equal to false. So by default, we're not showing the details. And now what I'm going to do is say h2 friend details. And below that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have, I don't know where that came from. I'm going to have, oh, that's why my fingers are off again. So I'm going to have a paragraph here. And in this paragraph, I'm going to have basically a link to that friend. So in there, I want to have a target of blank. And let's come back to this in a second. So I need to somehow listen for an event. So when you click on a particular friend, we're going to show the friend details there. So what I want to do is add a vOn directive. The shorthand for that is @. So we're going to say when somebody clicks, I want you to call a method called show friend, and I want you to pass this particular friend in there. So we're going to set up a methods block here, and we're going to say we need to create a method called show friend, I think it was. Yep. So we're going to say show friend, which is going to take in a friend. And all we're going to say is this dot selected. Let's set up a variable. So we'll say selected friend. You can say empty, you can say null, however you want to say it. This dot selected friend is equal to friend. And actually, we probably should set that up to null. And then finally, we need to set that variable that we showed, show details, equal to true. So we could do something else with that, probably a computer property to kind of look at if we have a selected friend or not. But we're just messing around here, so that should work. So when you click this, it's going to show that, it's going to show the details, and it's going to pass the friend in there. So now we have a selected friend object that should give us all of that data that we need. So the first thing we need to do is build out the URL. So we're going to say https://twitter.com/ now what we need is the selected friend, right? So now we can come in here and say selected friend.id, because that's their username. So like at the real Dan Vega. So there's that. I don't know why I did that. I think I originally had this in backticks. But you can do either. So you could have backticks here. You can use string concatenation. So this is actually a vbind directive. We're saying, hey, whatever is in here, I want you to evaluate this. So we can't just put a normal, the normal string in there because it'll think it's like a variable. So we're doing some concatenation here with a raw string. So the twitter.com and then whatever selected friend.id evaluates to. And so finally in here, I'm going to put some text inside of there. So I'm just going to say selected friend.id. And this has, we just want to show their name as well. So selected friend.name. So I think that's good. Restarted. Looks like we have something going on. Cannot read property ID of null. Cannot read property ID of null. So that's because of this. Oops. That's probably why I went with that route. Okay, so now we have a list of users. So now as I hover over them, I'm going to go ahead and click on one, and now it shows the details. So it flopped that, it switched that variable over to a Boolean of true, and it passed the selected friend into here so that we could then create this link, which will go ahead and open up Twitter. So, and then we can just click another one, and as we click around, it updates that friend details. So nothing terribly exciting, but what I hope this shows off is that you can start to play around with Vue very quickly, because especially here in Spring Boot, you're able to just drop Vue into any file and get going with it right away. And again, this really helps with prototyping. Like, you don't want to set up expensive tooling and all this like environment stuff. You just want to like learn. If you just want to learn something or play around with something or prototype something, this is one of the easiest and fastest ways to do so. And so I like doing this in Spring Boot applications when I'm just kind of messing around and trying to get something up and running. So hopefully you find that useful as well. So I think that's where we're going to cut it off today. If you enjoyed this one, please give me that thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and as always, friends, happy coding.